Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bent Limbs podcast. I am your host, Matt Thiel King, and today on episode number 2, we're going to be talking about heavy crossbow bolt setups, high FOC crossbow bolt setups, and I've got a guy that I found on a Facebook group. His name is Tyree Appleberry. We've definitely become friends, and some of the things that he is doing very similar to what I'm doing, but also just some really cool different things. And he's having a lot of success with shooting heavy, high FOC bolts from his crossbow. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Tyree, thanks for coming on. Welcome to the Bent Limbs podcast.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure being here. And yes, I too can say definitely have become good friends.
So why don't you just take a minute, introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, what crossbow you shoot, and maybe just how you got started with the heavy bolt high FOC setups that you're playing around with now.
Okay, that's not a problem. All right, my name is Tyree Appleberry. Everyone just calls me Ty. 52 years old. I hail from here in Atlanta, Georgia. I actually just really seriously got into crossbows probably within the last year. And it was more or less because I saw a whole lot of videos about them and I was like, okay, that would be great. And then I started researching the hunting and the different aspects of it, which gave me an opportunity to unwind after a hard week or wanting to just get away. Unfortunately, the coronavirus took hold and put a lot of things on hold for a lot of people. However, I just dove into the crossbow sector even more deeply. Now, after probably maybe a month of having my crossbow, I shoot the Killer Instinct Boss 405 crossbow. Love it. Absolutely love this crossbow. Unfortunately, during that time, I did crack my limbs, and that just devastated me. To no end, it devastated me. So I started researching. I started watching all different types of videos, listening to different podcasts, and I came across the Ranch Fairy. And a lot of what he was saying was making a lot of sense to me. So I started doing a little bit more research, and it come to find out that basically the companies, and this is nothing against the companies, this is marketing. They putting out these crossbows plus 400 feet per second, 450 feet per second, and now they got one knocking down 500 feet per second. But in order for them to basically achieve these speeds, they had to shoot something a lot lighter than basically was intended for these crossbows. Yes, they did meet these speeds. Yes, it did cause a lot of problems. It was basically, now, and this isn't just in my opinion, my disclaimer, it was basically dry firing your crossbow. Like pulling it back, locking it in, pulling the trigger, and shooting absolutely nothing. The energy from these weapons was going nowhere. It needed something to transfer this energy to, and the lightweight bolts just was not it. And so began my story into heavy bolts, 550 grains or more, finding the bolts basic minimum, the crossbow, basic bolt minimum that would allow them to still function exceptionally well, yet not causing any damage to your bolt or your crossbow. And that started it for me, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, your story is very similar to mine. My buddies and we got started with all this too with the Ranch Fairy, and I talked about this a little bit in episode 1, but we really
Right.
got started with this. It wasn't so much that we had a bow that broke a limb. We were just honestly, we were just struggling with mechanical broadheads, and if that's what you listeners out there are shooting, there's really nothing wrong with that. They work, they kill deer. I've killed plenty of deer with them, but we were just having some really goofy things happen on what should have been lethal shots on whitetails with both our compound bows and our crossbows. And we started tinkering around with all the Ranch Fairy methods and, kind of his arrow building strategies and practices with our compounds. And then we were like, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do this with our crossbows. And we started doing it too. And man, I mean, we have 1 year, I guess, under our belt of, Ranch Fairy heavy or heavier crossbow bolts with higher FOC. So we don't have near the experience he does, but I can tell you, this was probably the first year where my collective group of friends, both crossbow hunters and compound bow hunters, and there were more crossbow hunters than compound, but that none of us lost a deer out of my probably, I don't know, 10 or 12 friends that all kind of started tinkering around with this, started playing around with this. We all shot heavier bolts and arrows. We all shot fixed blade broadheads. We all recovered every single deer that we shot. So there's definitely, there's definitely something to this. And, I see it. I know you see it. I know there's a lot of other people out there that see it. And I think you're right with the limb breaking situation. I mean, the crossbows now are just, it's insane how fast they shoot and how, competitive the price points are for bows that shoot over 400 feet per second. And I agree that I think we've crossed the threshold of, bolt weight and speed. I think the speed is there, but I think we, and I say we as the industry, I think needs to start maybe looking at just up in bolt weights, just so there is more energy transferred into the bolt, less energy transferred into the limbs. I definitely think that is a factor in why a lot of crossbows now are busting limbs from all different manufacturers. So I think it's a very positive thing. I know you've seen it. I've seen it. Why don't you take me through, kind of your process? I kind of want to hear, and I know we've kind of talked about it a little bit, on the phone previously, but just kind of tell the listeners your process and how you're finding that bolt weight that's working, what bolts you're shooting, and kind of where you're ending up, maybe just from how you first started tuning some bolts to where you got to what your Boss 405 likes to shoot.
Okay. Basically, in the beginning, it was just try something, see what happens. Try something else, see if it's any better or worse. And I'll honestly say I probably destroyed countless. It's definitely destroyed countless bolts. From some of the most durable being like the pile drivers, to even the bolts that come with my bow is the hyper light bolts. And I've ripped them apart trying to figure it out. Then I got into one of these kits. Matter of fact, it was the Ranch Fairies kits, where it starts off with, I think, like 100 grain up to a 300 grain. And okay, what is it that I could lose? Not much. Tried it. Then a friend of mine said, well, he had some 175 grain inserts. That to me was great because I knew nothing about it at the time. So I researched it, figured out, okay, I could do this. And next thing you know, my workbench became my bolt building bench. A lot of us are doing this on a very strict budget. And I'm sorry, I'm one who can't afford to go buy $100 broadheads just for one broadhead. Let me think about that. Yeah, no, not going to happen, especially something 200 grains. Yeah, it's not going to happen. My girl is not going to allow that to happen. She's going to be like, you spent what on one? Yeah, not going to happen. Incidentally, she is a crossbow hunter as well. She shoots the Barnett TS-370, and she
Okay.
loves it. But that started the tinkering. So then it was, okay, let's break this down and get your bolt's minimum weight. A friend of mine suggested I try this formula that was given to him, and it basically told me my bow's minimum weight for a crossbow was 550 grains. There I was, stripping the bolt down to absolute nothing except the shaft and fletchings and a knock, taking out the insert, weighing it, then adding the weight of my broadhead, which I wanted to shoot, which I knew was a fixed blade, and I knew it was 150 grains across the board. It was no deviating from that. Fixed blade, 150 grains. Then it became to subtracting that weight to get 550 grains with the weight of the bolt, weight of insert, weight of broadhead. I touched it, and it was a beautiful thing. I mean, absolutely beautiful. As far as quiet, you heard a clear thump from the bow, not the twang, not a buzz, just thump, and it was over. And bolt down range, the flight stability was incredible. Then it was like, okay, I started listening to FOC. For those of you who don't know, front of center. So I started measuring the bolts for, let's find out where my FOC is. And I've been knocking down 23, 24, 25, just playing with it. Now I'm locked in with my hyper light bolts at 30%, and with my pile driver bolts, and those are my go-to backup bolts, at 26% FOCs. And they are literally missiles. They go through anything and everything. So I kind of been stuck there, and I'm not trying. Now I thought about playing around with, let's go up some more weight. Let's do this. Let's do that. Just to push the limits. But then I thought, why? This is going to be it for this bow. So why am I going to push the limits if this is it? It's nothing that, as far as I'm concerned, is going to do too much more. However, me being who I am, I went up in the weight and find out that 550 is beautiful. But then 683 to be exact, worked just as beautiful, especially as far as stability and quieting the bow. The kinetic energy, 172 foot-pounds. Yeah, it slowed my bolts down a little bit, but not so much that I wouldn't be able to take a whitetail or a hog or pretty much anything that I shot at. I'm still putting out speeds the average compound bow is. And once I did that, it was like I thought I was done, but then I started hearing about paper tuning. New challenge. Then I started hearing about knock tuning. Bigger challenge. And now, I don't think it's anything that if I put my mind to it as far as a target and accuracy that I can't do with my crossbow. And this is speaking, and yes, I am going to say this is speaking against some of these $3,000-$4,000 crossbows, okay? Sure, okay. You go waste your money, and I'm going to do the exact same thing you're doing with mine. And I'm still going to save several $100s doing it. That's just me. My opinion.
I've shot I have 3 crossbows here. My first one was a Barnett Wildcat. That was a $225 bow. I then went to a PSE Invictus. That was a $350 bow. Still have the PSE. Then went to the KI stuff. I went to the Ripper 415, which at the time, I think when I got it, it was like a $350 bow. And I still love that bow. That's actually now my buddy's bow. He's hunting with that one now. And I've since moved up, I guess, in price point to the SWAT XP, which I also love. It's different, but I love it. I love how small it is. But all of them, and like I said, I still have the PSE. We played with the Ripper. We played with the SWAT. We played with my buddy's got. I wish I knew what type of 10-point it was. It's like a middle of the road 10-point crossbow. Another buddy has a Wicked Ridge. Another buddy has a KI. I think it's a Machine, one of their earlier bows. So right. varying price points, varying speeds, and when all of them did, what you're talking about, everybody was very happy. Everybody was like, "Wow, this is awesome. I'm fine with the speed loss. My accuracy is way better. That the sound of your bow, like what you're saying, it's not that real twang sound, or like with my SWAT before I did this, it was just it wasn't twangy. It was a very sharp sound. That bow it's got big cams. It's got a long power stroke, even for how short it is. There was a lot of vibration moving through that bow, and the bow did a good job soaking up that power. But man, when you went to a heavier bolt, it was like butter, and all of them were like butter, both with the way they felt, the way they shot.
Even the slight recoil you have is clean. It's like a solid thump.
Yep.
It's hard to explain it, and you have to just get out there and just do it. And those guys out there who are waiting for new limbs or whatever happened with their bows to get fixed or whatever, I'm gonna present you a challenge. Try it. You have nothing to lose but everything else to gain, and you will notice the difference immediately. My neighbor lives 2 doors down. He has a 10-point, one of the higher price line ones, and he would see me out every day shooting, and he decided to come out one day and was like, "Well, I brought my target because I don't think your target's going to stop it, blah, blah, blah." And to me, it was like, "Okay, let's go. Let me see what you got." And all of his shots were decent. He was on a stable platform, locked in, and his shots were decent. And then he shot mine and didn't want to give mine back. He was like, "Okay, let me trade you mine for yours." I was like, "No, thank you." He says, what in the world did you do?" He used other more colorful language, but we won't do that. And I said, "I did this, I did that." And he was like, "Could you do that for mine?" I was like, "Yeah." Next thing you know, I was building him a brand new set of 6 bolts. And he's been overjoyed with them ever since, and constantly asks me, "Have I come up with anything else that could improve this and improve that? What could I do to make this?" And we've sat down here in my garage where I am right now at length many nights discussing it and reworking things for his bow, and he absolutely loves it now. He says, I loved it before. He says, now it's like, I never thought this bow could get any more accurate than it already is. And he says, now, even when I'm freestanding, it doesn't float all over the place. Everything is just perfect. He says, my bolts don't have that wiggle in the rear of it. He says, it's just, they hit. I'm like, that's what a FOC does. That's what a heavier bolt will do for you. And he says, and it's so quiet now. I'm like, and it definitely does that. So, yeah, go ahead.
You were talking about, as you were describing kind of what you're doing, and now also talking about, helping your neighbor set up, his 10-point with some different bolt setups. You'd mentioned a calculator or a calculation that you had used originally with your with your Boss 405. Is that the same calculator that you had shared with your neighbor? And if so, what was that? Because I personally, I haven't used anything as far as like an online calculator or some kind of formula to help me figure out, a ballpark for my bolts. Can you describe for the listeners what that was and where they could find it if they want to check that out too?
Well, I personally don't know where to find it. I had been talking to another guy on our group at Killer Instinct, and a friend told him about it, and he put that calculation into play, and it worked. So I went about it. When he told me about it, he said, just try this. And when I did, it worked across the board for whatever crossbow that you're shooting. And it was more or less, I implemented me basically more or less for the crossbows that were shooting these high speeds to save limbs, strings, whatever, just to give your bow more accuracy. And it worked. And it even works for even the lower speed crossbows. My girl has a Barnett, like I said, a Barnett TS 370, but she's shooting a 525 grain bolt like it was meant to be shot out of that bow, like nothing. And her accuracy is phenomenal. She doesn't get out there as much as me. However, when she does get out here, they're perfect shots every time. It amazes me. I'm like, I practice every day, and then you come out here for 10 minutes and you throwing bolts like you've been doing this for a few months. So she says it feels different, it sounds different, and she says she can actually see what's going on with the bolt when it's flying because it's so straight and not erratic that you can actually keep an eye on it to the target.
Yep.
And it's amazing. It really is. And now she won't shoot anything less than that. She's like, well, when I get me some new cross bolts, you're going to have to build them for me because I'm not going to shoot anything that comes with it now. You turned me on to this heavy thing. And she says, if I decide to get onto the Facebook stuff, I'm definitely going to your heavy hitter club that you're a part of because I'm a heavy hitter now. And again, she shoots a crossbow that averages out at 370 feet a second. So she slowed hers down to roughly 315, 320 feet. I've slowed mine down to roughly 340 in that sector right there.
And that's, whoever has this calculator on the Killer Instinct on the page that we're on, he's got a good one, whatever formula he's using, because, listening to you to say that with those two bows, I mean, that's pretty much right where I'm at as well. So my SWAT XP, as well as my buddy's Ripper 415 and that PSE Invictus 370, we're all shooting serious Phoenix bolts. That's our favorite. But with my SWAT, I'm at 530 grains or 531. And with that, with the PSE Invictus and then the Ripper 415, we're at 506. So very similar, very, very similar as far as what weights are shooting, that butter, both in how it feels as well as how it flies, how it hits. And your speeds are also extremely similar. So that Ripper 415, I know, and we, just, I guess, so everybody knows, and as well as so we don't have a chronograph. We're not shooting through a chronograph. We just go by, okay, if I take my stock bolts, I shoot them, and I dial in my speed ring scope. We all have, even my PS Evo has a version of a speed ring scope on it. Just what is the difference in speed versus that, the stock bolt with 100 grain point? Where was that at when we got all the ballistic dots dialed in? And then when we added weight and found a setup that we liked, okay, now when we recalibrate it, where are we at? So that Ripper 415 is right about the exact same place that your Boss 405 is. That was about 335 to 340 at 506 grains. And then my PSE Invictus, that was one that was 370. That one, same setup, was at, I think it was right about the same as what your girlfriend is shooting, like 320. And my SWAT XP, which is a 500 or 415 feet per second crossbow, that's at, I want to say like 370 now, 375 with a 531 grain bolt. So all of this, I mean, what I really like about this is, there's a lot of people that talk about it, or I've seen a lot of stuff, on social media or on the Facebook groups, but it's translating. There seems to be some sweet spots. There seems to be some commonalities where people are dialing in setups and having good results. And it's just really cool to hear you say those same type of things, I guess, to me, just knowing that it is in fact kind of a setup that maybe these bows were intended to be set up for. If that is a sweet spot and it's translating across some different manufacturers, some different speed ranges, I think it just it builds my confidence. I hope it builds the confidence of the people listening to this, because there are certainly some commonalities.
Right. And people are like, well, I'm doing this with mine, or how does that work with mine? Well, basically, if your crossbow is a 200-pound draw, your minimum bolt weight is roughly 500 grains. That's with broadhead. For a crossbow that's shooting 210 would be 525. And like mine with my Boss 405, my draw weight is 220, and it basically calculates down to 550. So if your bow have these draw weights, this right here is your basic starting point for where you should be. From 200 to 220 pounds draw, 500, 525, 550. That's your basic. That should be your bottom line.
Okay.
I don't have, not to my knowledge now, one of my friends who I've helped, they may have had an issue with this, but has never said anything. However, far as I understand, nobody has had any more issues with their limbs once they went to this formula or to these specific grain weights. Now, I will say, I was at one of my local sporting shops. It's called Gable Sporting Goods out here in Douglasville, Georgia, and was talking to a gentleman who was actually buying himself a ripper, and he saw my Boss, and he was asking me all these questions. So I went down the gambit: this, that. Don't do this, don't do that, do this, and do before you do anything. He didn't listen. Within a week, he was back and then called me and said, I should have listened. What do I need to do? I talked to him through it, actually on a video chat, about 2 hours one night while we were both up. He got his bow set up. He has no more issues. In that conversation, one of the bow techs who was setting up this guy's bow overheard our conversation and actually took in a lot of what I had to say and started implementing what I said and passing it on to his customers. Okay, this is what this comes with, and this is what this crossbow will do. However, this, and that is what you should set up for before you shoot. Because if you don't, you run that risk. But I feel I needed to tell you. Well, since he had started telling his customers that, he has not had one customer come back with a limb issue or any other issue related to shooting these light bolts, to the point where he told his the shop owner, they actually want me to come in, set up a little Killer Instinct booth, because they are a dealer for Killer Instinct, and pretty much talk to people about their crossbows that they're considering buying. And I told them I would love to do it. However, I had to, I wanted to just go out and get permission from Killer Instinct. I didn't want to just start saying things like that without having their consent to do so. Didn't want to get put under a heavy weight and just get slammed. So that's what my holdup is. But I am definitely interested in doing it, and they're definitely interested in having me come in and explain some of these things. He says your knowledge as far as especially the 405 line of crossbow with Killer Instinct is beyond his. He's like, I know about it, but you know about it. Your research behind it goes far beyond mine. And you being able to talk to some of the customers who are actually interested in it, and some of our other bows as well, since it does cross those lines, would pretty much ensure people being satisfied with their purchase. So that's one of my targets right now. And it's like kind of stick your chest out type of thing, I'm gonna be the first to say I catch some flack. I do, especially on some of the websites. And okay, you're free to believe and have your own opinions just like me. But when you have people who are actually looking at you now, you have people who are coming back requesting you, off chats from the group, sending you box messages saying, look, I need help. And several of these people are some of those people who used to just bash me, now are coming to me for help. And again, I'm not going to turn down anybody because I don't do this for a monetary gain. I do this because I just love it. And I know how it feels to have something just don't work enough for you. It's like something's wrong. I got to be able to do something and not know what to do. And then you turn to your platform, who you like, a group like the Killer Instinct group, and there's literally someone there who's willing to go that extra mile to help you. That would be me. Because if I had someone to do that for me in my beginnings, a lot of the issues I had, I would not have had. So that's where I am now. Anyone who wants to know anything, especially about the 405 line, feel free to ask. And let's find out. If I don't know it, we're going to find out about it. And even if it's not from the 405, let me do a little bit of research on your crossbow, and I'll get back to you. And it's not one person I haven't gotten back to. And I still have had no negative responses. It's all been positive.
I think it's just awesome that you are, that you're sharing these things, that you're working with a local dealer, and that you're having, success doing that, and that you're having people that are happy with that. And that's just to put it out there for the listeners. I mean, shoot what you're confident in. I mean, you don't necessarily have to take Ty and I's word for this, but we're doing this, or we've learned these things by having some issues with flight, having some issues with harvesting game. I mean, that's me, the harvesting game part for sure. Having some issues with, there's plenty of people having issues with broken limbs. So it's one of those things where just, everybody out there, I know there's going to be varying opinions on this. And this is ours, and it's based purely on, what we've seen and what we've tried. And, I'm happy with it. I know you are. I know you've got a lot of happy, if you want to call them customers, or just people that you've guided with this. And right. Honestly, I wish, I haven't seen a local bow, or local sporting goods store have someone talking about this or talking crossbows, really. I mean, there's a lot of attention when I go on your compounds and paper tuning and setting up your rests and getting your sights and your peep aligned and your kisser button and all that stuff. And all that stuff is good. But normally when I go to a sporting goods store, crossbow is just kind of like, here's the bolts it comes with, let it rip. There isn't a whole lot of a whole lot of info or a whole lot of experience. So, just first, thank you for doing that, and just for sharing what you've learned, passing that on, trying to get some people hopefully ahead of the game with their bow. And it's great to see that, what you're talking about, what you've learned, and what you're passing on is translating to, to other individuals. And my buddies and I were all mechanical shooters just because we could never get a fixed blade from our compound bow or our crossbow to fly like we wanted to. And when we started doing this and we started listening to the ranch fairy, just paying attention to how different variables affected our compound bow flight or our crossbow flight, our bolt flight, man, we got fixed blade shooting just beautifully. The one thing that we noticed, excuse me, the one thing that we noticed was a fixed blade compared to our field point would fly just a little bit lower. So Ranch Fairy has talked about this in some of his videos, that sometimes they just fly just a little bit heavy, just having some more surface area, some more stuff out on the front of your bolt to catch the wind and stuff. We noticed that, and it would be, I'm talking like 2 to 3 inches at 40 yards, where left to right was absolutely perfect. And watching the bolt fly with a lighted knock, there was nothing erratic. It just hit a little lower, and it was a really easy scope adjustment for us. Man, like I said earlier, I've got 1 year. My friends and I have 1 year in the books of shooting these setups, but we all recovered deer, and we had a lot of people that shot deer that, they didn't even know they were hit. The bolt just zipped through them so fast. Mine was one. My friend Brent was one. My friend Michael was one, where all those deer, it just zipped right through them. There was no big thwack. There was no pushing a real heavy or real wide cutting diameter through that animal. They didn't even know they were hit. They just took a couple bounds, stopped, stood there, and tipped over. So there were 3 deer.
My first deer was like that. My very first deer ever was like that. It was a frontal shot. It hit this doe left chest, passed through, traveling completely through the body, exiting out rear left leg, and embedding in the ground before she moved. Then she moved, ran off a total of 37 yards, and then laid down. Before she even knew she was hit. I think she reacted just to the fact that when I shot her, I was like, yes! Then she took off. So it was like, that was incredible, because I literally saw the hit, and she just stood there. She knew she was not, she just, like she wasn't hit at all. And then I had another experience where I shot, matter of fact, it was the biggest doe I've shot. She weighed in at 143 pounds, fully dressed. Fully undressed. No guts, no skin, no head, no feet. 143 pounds.
Okay.
The shot hit her broadside, slightly quartering, slightly. But I know, because I saw it hit the branch that was right in front of her, and it clean cut that branch without any deviation in flight. Cleaned it, snapped, and still hit her and passed in and broke her leg on her right side, because they hit her on the left side. So definitely a fixed blade. Definitely. I don't think a mechanical blade would have done that. You hit a branch with a mechanical, in my opinion, that's your flight. Your flight is gone. End of discussion. That's either a bad shot or a total miss. And this branch that hit, maybe as thick as my pointer finger, and cleaned it like it was nothing. Like someone took a ninja sword and just slapped that branch, and it was cut in half, and it still hit her directly.
Yeah, and that, that goes back to kind of the whole reason the Ranch Fairy and other people too share this type of setup of heavier high OFOC bolts or
Yes.
arrows, fixed blade broadheads, is they're plan B arrows. They're when something goes wrong, when you don't hit exactly where you want on the animal, or in your case, there was something in front of the animal that you weren't accounting for, that you just didn't know was there. Your success rate is higher, that you should be able to still produce a lethal hit on that animal. And I mean, shot placement obviously matters when you're shooting at a deer. If you hit them bad, it's a crapshoot. But lack of penetration typically is the one thing, or the number one thing, that causes a lot of people to lose or wound animals. And this setup mentality of using a fixed blade, bumping your weight up, bumping your FOC up, is just planning for your hitting bone. You're hitting something goofy. And you still have the ability, you still have the momentum to drive through that and hopefully get in far enough where you could kill one. Where with a light setup and a mechanical broadhead, your chances of achieving that they're just less, based on the way that those broadheads are designed, and momentum not being as high as with that higher FOC, heavier setup. It's just a harder thing to do. So yeah, I completely agree. I mean, plan B setups.
I don't worry about hitting a bow now. I don't. I don't think about it any longer. Whatever I hit with one of my bolts, it's destroyed. Period. I got to get it right here, right above the leg. Maybe, no, I don't worry about that anymore. I don't. After hitting a deer, after hitting a branch, and it going all the way through and slamming into this opposite side legs and shattering that leg like it was nothing, I don't care about what I hit anymore. If I hit that animal anywhere it's supposed to be hit, whether the leg was in the way or the shoulder blade was in the way, whether ribs are in the way, they're done. It's lights out. Broken ribs, broken legs, broken whatever, shoulder blade, it's broke. It's penetrated, it's cracked, it's over. Yeah, and I know people are like, well, we're not shooting 2x4s and 2x6s, and no, you're not. But when you could take one of what you're shooting and put one through it and split it and still have penetration into a target standing behind it, yeah, your worries tend to dwindle. It means, yeah, I just did that, and that's not even a deer, or it's not a hog, it's not whatever I'm hunting, but it did that. Whatever I shoot, it's done. It's broke. There's no turning back from it. That FOC is gonna take that bolt or arrow, and it's gonna pull right through it. All that energy that you save using it, but cut your speed a little bit, but all that energy makes up for it because it's still going where it was supposed to go. Anything short of a brick wall is not gonna stop it. A hole that went through my garage wall into the storeroom, out the backside wall, storeroom wall, and out the backside of my house, and stuck in the ground to prove that with a 550 grain bolt. And it passed two walls, 4 levels of sheetrock, and whatever else, the insulation that was inside of those walls. It went through them and out the back of my house through the vinyl siding and stuck in the ground about 20 feet behind the house. So, yeah, I'm good. I am so good.
And we've certainly seen some similar results, both on just kind of playing around, or how far these bolts are now penetrating through targets or multiple targets, or one whitetail in particular. A buddy of mine, that he had a buck, he was either on the ground or he was just about on the ground, and this thing came in, and he was able to I think it was only 10 yards away, was able to kind of thread one, right. It was basically, it wasn't like a complete frontal shot, but it was close. It was a very sharp quartering too, where he was able to, with it being so close, he was confident he could sneak it right in front of the near side shoulder and try to get it to pass out the opposite side shoulder, and he caught some bone, and it didn't matter. But I think, though, it is important to say that it's not it's nothing is a guarantee in bow hunting or crossbow hunting. And we owe it to the animal to take the best possible shot that we can. We're not, Tyree and I are not advocating for you to just sling at, whatever shot angle you get and just try to blast through everything, because we've all had crazy scenarios happen, shots that should be kill shots that aren't. I think, what we're both saying here is that when you have a plan B arrow setup that's capable of doing that, in the event that something does go wrong, or you just don't quite hit where you wanted to, or maybe you do have one of those, just it's a tight angle, you're confident you can hit it, type of thing. It just gives you confidence that your setup can get through it, if it needs to, or it has a way higher probability of getting through it. But saying again, not saying you should just take any shot angle you get, but when a plan B type of scenario happens and a shot either ends up being not quite what you want it to be, or just a situation you don't quite want it to be, a heavy arrow, a high FOC setup, fixed blade broadhead is going to give you a higher chance of success.
Right. And with that, when you're in the stand or you're in the blind and that target comes through, everything is heightened. Your adrenaline, your heart rate, your breathing, everything is. Now your mind is racing. Let's eliminate some of the problem. Okay, if your mind is going to race, let's not wonder, well, if I do hit it, what if I hit this? I don't worry about that. I do shoot for accuracy. I practice every day. I have well over now 2,000 shots. I practice literally every day. And in those moments when that harvest that you're planning on coming in to get walks in front of you, the last thing you need to be doing is wondering, okay, if I hit it right here, and this is pretty much one of the only shots I have, is it going to make it? I shoot knowing it's going to make it. But that doesn't take away from get out there and you practice. You do what you do. You have a little downtime if you're up at night. Set your little range up like I do in my garage. From the end of my driveway to the back wall of my garage is 30 yards exactly. I shoot. I practice. I'm confident in hitting bottle caps at 33 yards, and that's putting a bolt right through it. So when I do have that opportunity to harvest an animal, I know where I'm going to shoot it, and I know where I'm going to aim at. And with everything perfect, that's exactly what's going to happen. However, you can account for all of a sudden that animal wanting to take a step right as you pull the trigger.
Yep.
You can account for him hearing that hiss of this bolt zooming toward him and it ducking that line or jumping the string, however you want to phrase that. However, know that when you hit it, that bolt is going to do its job. I do not advocate going out there and just willy-nilly shooting at something and saying, well, yeah, I'm going to do it. No, it doesn't happen that way, and it's never happened that way. Practice. Plan your shots. Know where you're shooting. Shoot that vital organ area. If you can hit double lung and heart at the same time, take it. Take it. If you're in that questionable angle, I can possibly, but if you're questioning whether or not you're going to be able to make it because of the broadhead you're using, or the weight of your arrow you're shooting just might not do it, or you notice you got that unstable flight when you shoot, so it could very well tip off something you're trying to squeeze past, and then don't do it. But with my setup, I don't question that anymore.
And I think the key word that you said there is confidence, is just having confidence in your setup. Whatever that setup is, just knowing that you've got the ability to hit what you're aiming for, but also that it's got that plan B set up behind it in case something goes wrong.
Right.
You know, confidence is the biggest thing when you're in the woods. I mean, 100%. If you're confident in your setup, you're confident in your ability to hit what you're aiming at. You know, if plan B happens, then you've got some margin for error compared to having not done, you know, anything related to tuning or playing around with broadheads. And, you know, tinkering is another word that I think you use, and that really is it. And that's, you know, that's not only the bread and butter of it, to where you find the setup that works for your bow, but it's also kind of the fun part. That's where the tinkering comes in, is just have fun and mess around with stuff. Like, don't be afraid to just try some things and find that setup where, you know, like what you're saying, where it's like, okay, I did my job. I found the setup that shoots best out of my crossbow. I'm getting the results I want. I have this high confidence level. Like, that is all going to translate not only within your setup to more success, but just mentally, that like, you know, you alluded to earlier, that you're not having to overthink scenarios when the moment of truth is unfolding right in front of you. And, you know, all of us struggle to think at that stage of the hunt where it's all unfolding. You know, the last thing you want to be doing is overthinking things. So being able to tinker, being able to just try stuff and experiment and just find whatever that setup is that works best for your crossbow. And, you know, kind of wanting to I wanted to take just a step back really quick while we're talking about, you know, building this confidence with setups. You know, you're shooting you know, that the hyperlight bolts, the bolts that Killer Instinct makes. You're in a really, you're heavy, and you're having success with that. Can you maybe, on, I guess, 2 points to just touch on for the listeners? One, you know, what is kind of your indicator when you've got a setup that you like, when you're shooting at a target? And then also, you talked about you're at 150 grain broadhead, and I know those bolts are, you know, as they come stock, a little bit on the lighter side. Can you tell the listeners either what you're using for inserts, or kind of what you're doing to add that weight to the front, where it's not just the broadhead up front?
Okay, my inserts, and I'm not sponsored by them, but Ethics Archery, they're my go-to. I love Amazon and nothing from Amazon, but I go to Ethics Archery for their inserts, period. Brass inserts, period. And something stackable, period. So if I need to add weight to it, I don't have to go, oh my God, I got to go try to find this heavier insert. No, I can just add a little weight to it just by adapting it to the end of it, because they're made for that. I love them. They work phenomenal. I definitely observe the flight. I'm looking for any erratic behavior. Any. To me, that's a stop. Something's wrong. That bolt was not supposed to do that. But from the ground, I am definitely looking at, when I come up to the target, how are my bolts angled? If I got too much of a tail up, okay, that to me is that's a lot too much weight on it, because now you got to adjust for that, and it's still hitting at that nose down, tail up. Most of my bolts now literally are almost at a 90 degree to my target.
Okay.
They're perfect flights to me. When you start stepping out in range, once you hit 40, it's hard to get that perfect flight, especially with a heavy setup. If you're shooting anything more than that one, I think it's unethical. That's me personally. However, if you're going to shoot 40 and beyond, you might need to lighten that weight without going under your bolt minimum for your crossbow. So you might have to shoot the bottom of the barrel as far as your bolt weight. But for the weights that I shoot, my bolt is almost perfect 90 degree into my target.
Okay.
From an elevated angle, almost you can think of it as going to forensics. Like, they want to know the flight path of a bullet, where the shooter was standing when he shot. You can pretty much take a string from the end of my bolt to where I was standing, and that's going to be that continuous angle. It's not going to be deviated. It's a straight flight. Straight, period. So if it's at an angle up and you're shooting at an up angle, you can take a piece of string from that and go to the tip of your bow, and that's exactly where you were aiming at. That tells me that's where I need to be.
Yep. I think that is, that's exactly to what the Ranch Fairy does on his YouTube channel when he talks about, what his indicators are as far as when he knows he's getting good arrow flight, or in our case, good bolt flight. What you're talking about is a great indicator that if you don't want to do the paper tuning type of stuff that I personally do, just looking at not only where your bolt impacts your target, but how it impacts it, whether it's left, right, angled up, angled down, and adjusting some things to make sure that it's hitting just that perfect plumb 90 degrees to your target, or like what you're saying, like if you just took a string from your bolt to where you were shooting, is it just a perfect straight line? That's a great indicator. And I think, with that method, another thing that, we noticed, even though, my friends and I are big on the shooting through paper thing, is you can hear it too. Like when it hits your target, and I think you were alluding to this earlier, it's just a nice, just thud. Like it just sounds like something hit just nice, plumb, square. You're not seeing movement. You're not seeing a bolt sticking out of your target in a goofy angle or anything like that. It's just a real dead sounding thump.
Exactly.
And what you're talking about is just another version of kind of paper tuning for the most part. I mean, my friends and I just, I guess, like shooting through paper and seeing how it tears to pick up on the exact same indicators that you're doing, and reading those tears exactly how you're reading, whether your bolt is sticking in your target, high, low, left or right. It really is a preference of indicator. I feel like it's whatever you can decipher the best, whatever gives you the most confidence as far as when you're changing variables and you're seeing different things happen, whatever, be it just shooting into a target, being, a cardboard target or cardboard in front of your target, or being the paper tuning method that I do or that my friends and I do. You're really, it's all the same thing. It's just what your indicator preference is to ultimately get you to that setup that is perfect bolt flight.
But if you're trying to get that perfect bolt flight or arrow flight, paper is definitely a good way, probably a better way to go for most people, because that paper is unforgiving to something coming in at crooked. It's going to tear it. It is. But that's just my opinion. I don't claim to know a lot of things, but what I do know, and I'm talking about it, is because I've actually gone through the painstaking trials and tribulations of trying to figure it out. So when someone asks me a question about it, I'm not, well, maybe, and no, I've literally experimented with it. Period. I've tried it. Oh, that didn't work. I'm try this. And then when I'm able to give someone some information, it's because I've tried it.
It kind of all boils down to just, if is tinkering is, if you
Tinker. That's
can
it. That's the new word. Tinker.
is it is. And if, I'm sure there are certain, levels of comfort that different people have with how much they want to tinker versus, how little they want to. But at the end of the day, there's a lot to be learned with crossbows, with your bolt setup, with broadheads, with all of this stuff, all of the things that we've kind of talked about. I think it's a really fun process, and it's a really eye-opening one that if, you out there listening, if you just try it, if you just mess around a little bit, try some of the things that Ty and I have talked about, and by no means, don't take this as gospel. Figure out some other things that, maybe work for you that we didn't talk about. And if you find some stuff, gosh, by all means, please share it with us. Because at the end of the day, we're all trying to just be better crossbow shooters, better crossbow hunters, and ultimately have that result in, more successful hunts. I mean, that is the end goal. Tinkering is a big part of that, and that's what we're all striving for. And I guess here, Ty, before we wrap up, if anybody does have questions, directly for you, can you tell people the best way, to reach out to you, to find you, whether it be social media or on one of these groups? Just give the listeners, a place to seek out Tyree Appleberry if they have questions on crossbow bolt tuning.
Oh, not a problem. Not a problem. First of all, if any of you guys listening are part of Killer Instinct Hunters or Killer Instinct Crossbows, I am a member of both of those groups. I am also a member of Crossbows Only, Heavy Hitters Club. You can reach out and tag me in any one of those. I will definitely see your tag. And if you hit me up on the page, I'll gladly send you my number, open up a chat line with you, and you can give me a call. We'll video chat. We can do whatever you need to do. We'll get you going.
For that, man, just thank you. Thank you for sharing, what you've done, the things that you've tried, the experiences that you've had. I think this was a great podcast. I think there's a lot of information that people can kind of just digest, hopefully get that itch to start tinkering. Ty, thank you for joining me on episode 2 of the Bent Limbs podcast. This was awesome.
Hey, it was my pleasure.
It's really cool to just hear another person doing very similar things, having very similar results, but also, going about it a little bit different ways or different techniques. I think that is just something that people need to hear, and people need to just have the confidence to just tinker, to find that bolt setup that works with their bow. And, I can't wait to hear what some people think or what some people come up with after this podcast
It's not
series.
hard, folks. It's really not hard, and it's fun. I appreciate you having me on this podcast. Love it. Love the last one you did. Love the one, basically how I was introduced to you, watching your little video podcast on why are our crossbows breaking, the limbs cracking. That started it with me and you. So keep up the great content that you're putting out. I'm always on the front line waiting for something new to come out to watch. Always.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that. And I just appreciate you coming on and sharing what you've done, and, just having a forum that we can talk and, hopefully pass some learning, some experiences and things like that related to crossbows, related to crossbow hunting onto the listeners, to hopefully just make us all better crossbow hunters. So I really appreciate you coming on, man. We are definitely going to do this again. So just thank you. And thank you for all that you're doing and all the people that you're helping in the crossbow industry.
Yes, sir. Maybe our next one will be face-to-face, sitting in some plush office with nothing but crossbow stuff around us. Have a good night, man. It's been a pleasure. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you so much for all of you guys' support.
And that'll be a wrap, folks. Thank you for listening to episode 2 of the Bent Limbs podcast. We hope you enjoyed. Please, if you did, hit that like button. Also, hit the bell so you can be notified when new episodes come out. And by all means, fill us up with the comments, the questions, or the topics that you want to hear on this podcast so we can all become better crossbow shooters and better crossbow hunters. Till next time, I'm Matt Thiel King. Y'all have a wonderful night. Be safe in the woods, and good luck crossbow hunting.